Stephen Austin mostly recruits Southerners because Southerners are closest to Texas. As a land agent for the Mexican government, he institutes a system where the more people you bring to Texas, the more land you get, including you get bonus land for every slave you bring in. Texas is good farmland. Most of East Texas is good for cotton plantations. There's even some wetter parts that where you can grow sugar. So, these Americans, mostly from the South, move in, but they break the deal. They don't learn Spanish as promised. They don't convert to Catholicism. A lot of them don't care about religion at all, but those who do build like Baptist churches or whatever they're used to from wherever they were from in the U.S. Now, so far, they're obeying Mexican law, but that changes too. Mexico outlaws slavery in 1829. This was not a surprise. Mexico had been moving toward ending slavery for several years, so this is the culmination of a process that's been in the works for 20 years. But after Mexico outlaws slavery, the Texans ignore the law and they just continue keeping slaves. Texas is way out on the frontier. It's hard for the Mexican government to collect taxes in Texas, much less force folks in Texas to obey the law. So the Texans are happily getting away with continuing slavery, even though it's now illegal in Texas. Even the Tejanos, the Mexican-born Texans, are starting to practice slavery. They see how profitable it is for their U.S.-born Texan neighbors, and so Tejanos get in on the act too. They buy some slaves from the Texans, and they too are now addicted to slavery. It is Mexico trying to enforce the law that's going to lead to... There was a new leader in Mexico in 1836 named Santa Anna. Here he is. And Santa Anna wants to make Texas and other frontier states obey the law. He wants to collect taxes from frontier states, and he wants Texas to abolish slavery like the rest of Mexico has already done. And here's where the trouble starts. It's not where the trouble starts necessarily, but it's where the trouble deepens, because the Texans, the U.S.-born residents of Texas, now they didn't learn Spanish. They're not converting to Catholicism. Now they're breaking the law, and now, having promised to defend Mexico, they're going to attack Mexico. The attitude of the Texans is that Santa Anna is like King George III trying to take their rights away, and they're going to respond as their forebears did. It's going to be so the Texas Revolution is Texans, U.S.-born residents of Texas, and Tejanos, Mexican-born residents of Texas, joining forces to fight the Mexican government, fighting to save slavery. They're making so much money from slavery, they don't want to give it up. They're fighting for their freedom to keep black people as slaves because that's profitable. And Texas is fighting to secede from Mexico, to break away and become its own country. It starts badly. The Texans and Tejanos lose a major battle early at the Alamo. Alamo is a fortress in San Antonio, and the Texans and Tejanos fight bravely, but they are overwhelmed by superior numbers of Mexicans. Most of them fight to the last, but some surrender at the end, and most of the Texans who surrendered were massacred. Mexico views them as having committed treason, betraying their government, disloyal to their country. Penalty for that is death. That was a typical legal consequence around the world in the 1800s, but um, this is strategically unwise. In warfare, if you kill people who surrender, then people are less likely to surrender. They might as well fight to the end. And secondly, the massacre of the defenders at the Alamo increases sympathy in the United States for the Texas Revolution. Now, President Andrew Jackson is not going to take sides in any official capacity, but thousands of Americans on their own, especially Southerners, flocked to Texas to join the Texas Revolution, to help the Texans win their fight against Mexico. The key battle in the end is the Battle of San Jacinto. At the Battle of San Jacinto, Texan and Tejano forces, with lots of American reinforcements, defeat Mexico. Defeat Santa Anna. The president is also leading Mexico's forces. And here is Santa Anna surrendering to the Texas leader, Sam Houston. He was wounded in the battle. That's why he's lying on the ground there. But Texas wins. Texas Revolution is a success. Texas is now an independent country. There's Sam Houston. That's the guy who was lying on the turf now, rocking an outrageous bow tie. Houston was from Tennessee, old friend of Andrew Jackson's. And now, Texas doesn't really want to be an independent country. It wants to join the U.S., right? Most of the population are U.S. born, and they see this as a win for Manifest Destiny. Sam Houston is sure that his old friend, President Andrew Jackson, will happily annex Texas. By the way, these are the borders of Texas, like in yellow. These were the borders of Texas according to Mexico. And this is, in fact, the territory that the new Republic of Texas controls, although the Republic of Texas claims all this striped area. They don't control it. This is still under the control of Indians mostly. This area, still controlled by Mexico. There are towns and there are Mexican troops in place, but Texas is not satisfied with the amount with its original borders, what it has carved out from Mexico. It is interested in all this stuff too. By the way, the Tejanos, the Mexican-born Texans who joined the U.S.-born Texans in fighting the Texas Revolution, eventually are losers in this business. They had been promised equal partnership in the new Republic of Texas. That, over time, turns out to be a lie. A lot of the Americans who came down to help with the Texas Revolution end up staying, so the Tejanos are a smaller minority than they were before, and they increasingly, over time, are treated as second-class citizens. All right, so here's Sam Houston. He's now president of the Republic of Texas, asking the U.S. to annex him. He thinks it's going to be a done deal because of his relationship with Andrew Jackson and because Manifest Destiny is an inexorable force, and yet President Jackson does not annex Texas. Now, there's a couple of reasons why. First, Mexico is mad. Mexico is upset about losing this war. They do not recognize Texas independence. Mexico insists that they're going to reconquer their wayward province eventually. And it's not the U.S. is scared of Mexico exactly. It's just, Jackson figures it's probably a good idea to wait a few years, let Mexico get over the loss before Texas becomes part of the U.S. A far larger consideration for Andrew Jackson was that the U.S. was busy, too busy to take on annexing Texas and the political can of worms that they would cause, and we will start there next time. Bye, y'all.